Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephania Cox. Here are today's top stories. 13,000 Americans and Afghans have been flown out of Afghanistan since last week, and troops passed the security perimeter to help close to 170 people get to the airport. But for now, President Biden says it's risky to extend the perimeter. Stun grenades and gunfire on the way into Kabul airport. People evacuating from Afghanistan have to escape not only the Taliban, but also the shooting that takes place right outside the airport. U.S. troops are helping those people by picking them up in helicopters. A monoclonal antibody treatment for COVID-19 is gaining traction in Florida. The governor is opening more sites, saying a lot of people don't know about this option. Beijing passing one of the strictest data protection laws, but experts say it's not to protect users. Hurricane watch for northeast states. Massachusetts braces for what could be a direct hit from Tropical Storm Henri. The Afghanistan evacuation still underway. 13,000 Americans and Afghans have been flown out of the country since last week. But it's unclear how many Americans are still awaiting rescue. President Biden said today his administration is now working to verify this. NTD's Melina Wisecup has the latest on the U.S. evacuation mission.
President Biden today assuring Americans in Afghanistan and their families that his administration will do whatever it takes to get them out. And he says he's committing the same promise to Afghan allies who have helped the U.S. over the years.
Make no mistake, this evacuation mission is dangerous. It involves risks to our armed forces, and it's being conducted under difficult circumstances. I cannot promise what the final outcome will be, or what it will be, that it will be without risk of loss. But as Commander-in-Chief, I can assure you that I will mobilize every resource necessary.
U.S. forces are still not making trips into the countryside to pick up those who may not be able to get to the airport. And the president says they cannot extend security to cover more areas around the airport and secure more land for people to access flights because there are risks to doing so. Biden did explain there was a situation earlier this week where a small number of troops did help around 169 Americans get to the airport.
A small number of people that our troops, they were very close to the perimeter, the perimeter of the airport, very close. And in a short amount of time, with a short amount of distance, some of our troops were able to go out there and retrieve them and bring them in.
He acknowledged some instances where people have been beaten or blocked from entering, but he and President Biden are emphasizing that they're not aware of any situations where Americans and credentialed Afghans have faced this pushback from the Taliban.
The Taliban checkpoints, they are letting through people showing American passports. Now, that's a different question when they get into the rush and crowd of all the folks just outside the wall near the airport.
Biden also says his administration is looking at working with other countries around the world to help with food and medical supplies and getting the supplies to those neighboring countries where Afghan refugees may have fled to. And just this morning, President Biden met with NATO allies so they can touch base on how to move forward in regards to Afghanistan, preventing them from becoming a base for terrorist attacks that could threaten the United States and NATO allies. As for right now, the administration says they're laser focused on getting this evacuation mission completed, which is set to end at the end of this month. And President Biden says if they can't meet that deadline, that then he'll consider whether or not to extend this evacuation mission, Steph.
As more Afghans evacuate from Taliban-held areas, some are describing their arduous journeys to the Kabul airport. They had to flee not only from the Taliban, but also from stun grenades and gunfire near the airport.
Thousands of Afghans are still swarming the Kabul airport 5 days after the Taliban took over. Troops used stun grenades and fired into the air to hold back the crowds. Some Afghan evacuees who recently reached Italy are telling their stories. Some of them used to work for the Italian forces or the Italian embassy in Afghanistan.
From what we've seen in the first 3 or 4 days, the Taliban unfortunately have not changed. toward the population, toward the women, toward children and schools. Nothing has changed. They're trying to show they changed, but unfortunately, from what I have seen, they did not.
The man was a police officer and worked for the Afghan Interior Ministry, and because of that, the Taliban went looking for him.
We stayed in Kabul for 72 hours. These 72 hours were very difficult. It was a nightmare for myself and my family. The Taliban arrived in Kabul, and then next morning at 8 o'clock, the first armed group of the Taliban arrived behind my house, asking for me. They were searching for me. They had photographs in their hands and they were showing them to my neighbors.
Another evacuee belongs to an ethnic minority group that the Taliban have targeted for decades. He heard rumors that the Taliban were going into people's homes and looking for those who were in the previous government. When he led his family to the airport, they had to sleep in the streets.
We were in front of the airport door, and just before they opened the door, there were more than 800, 900 people wanting to get in. I was holding my son, who had just turned 2, but I was also holding my wife's hand. Because of the people pushing, my wife fell down, and I protected her from being trampled by other people.
The man and his family also had to watch for repeated gunfire while trying to get to the airport.
There were a lot of people. There were tanks and Kalashnikov rifles and machine guns on top of them, continuously firing at eye level. I had my son in my arms who was crying and scared. He had no voice and was just crying. My wife was scared as well. She was about to faint. I didn't even have a bottle of water. If I had waited another 2 minutes, my son and my wife would not have made it.
According to a NATO official, more than 18,000 people have been flown out of Kabul since the Taliban took over. There are currently close to 6,000 U.S. troops at the airport helping with evacuations.
And to help more people get to the Kabul airport, U.S. troops are using helicopters. Senior military officials said the helicopters have ferried close to 100 Afghans, mostly women and children, from outside the security perimeters. And if the Taliban finds any interpreters who worked with U.S. forces, they will most likely be killed. One Afghan interpreter who previously immigrated to the United States has been helping interpreters in Afghanistan escape to safety. NTD's Jason Perry has the story.
With our organization,
Ahmadullah Siddiqui was a guest on NTD's The Nation Speaks, starring Cindy Drucare. Siddiqui worked with U.S. forces in Afghanistan for 4 years.
I was an interpreter, a linguist with United States forces in Afghanistan, also working with the DEA from 2010 to 2014. And I applied for the SIV process in 2013, and I was one of the luckiest people who got my visa in 2014 and came to the state.
Now he works as a project manager for a nonprofit organization called No One Left Behind that helps people who have been displaced from their home due to their association with and support for Americans. Siddiqui says with the sudden takeover by the Taliban, thousands of Afghan interpreters are now in hiding.
The Taliban go door to door and find out the family, even they kill the families. We heard the other day they killed 2 interpreters.
Many of the Afghans risk their lives to help the U.S. forces and help the Afghan government, while also hoping for a chance to go to the United States. But that dream may be slowly fading away.
Thousands of interpreters, they applied recently, but they don't know what their destination will be. They are still in shock, in fear. Believe it or not, I have received hundreds of emails and text messages, not only me, but all the other ambassadors with our organizations. People are asking for their, destination. What will happen to them?
Because the Taliban is going door to door, Siddiqui said many of the interpreters were forced to get rid of their visa documents for fear the Taliban would find it and end their life.
Now, this is the question whether the U.S. will keep, its promise to expedite and bring all those allies home, because most of them, they do not have the paperwork. They throw it away, or they trashed it, or they put it somewhere. So that's the problem. Everybody should know this, that these folks worked, so now they deserve to be here.
Siddiqui also has a message for President Biden.
With due respect to all the decisions Mr. President has taken, I ask Mr. President should take immediate action to ensure that the U.S. That the way the U.S. leaves Afghanistan does not become a permanent stain on his legacy and America's legacy.
According to the No One Left Behind website, at least 300 interpreters and their family members have been killed for their association with the United States. Jason Perry, NTD News.
For the full interview, tune in to The Nation Speaks with Cindy Drucker at 11 a.m. Eastern Time here on NTD News. And the German Chancellor and Russian President met today, and one of their topics was Afghanistan. The German leader says her priority is to evacuate people who've helped their country's efforts there, while Putin wants to ensure terrorists do not leave Afghanistan and pour into countries near Russia's southern border. Here's NTD's Kevin Hogan with more.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel met with Russian leader Vladimir Putin at the Kremlin in Moscow on Friday. Merkel said the danger of terrorism in Afghanistan can be managed right now, but she called on the international community to help prevent terrorism from re-emerging in the country in the future. Merkel says Germany's priority is to evacuate people who have worked for them during NATO's 20-year campaign there.
And I also asked Russia to point out in their talks with the Taliban that the chance of cooperating also on humanitarian issues with the Taliban or UN organizations in Afghanistan would be better if the people who helped the Bundeswehr, the federal police, and development organizations were given an opportunity to leave the country.
Putin said the fact that the Taliban controls all of Afghanistan, including the capital, is a reality that needs to be taken into account. Russia had held joint military drills with Tajikistan and Uzbekistan earlier this month. It came as Moscow feared the lack of security in Afghanistan would cause refugees to pour into Central Asia.
In our view, the most essential thing now is to prevent the penetration of the terrorists into the territories of Afghanistan's neighbor states, including those disguised as refugees.
Putin said he wants to establish neighborly relations with Afghanistan, and after his meeting with Merkel, he said Moscow and its partners should unite to help the Afghan people. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
Florida is opening more antibody treatment sites, looking to have 21 by early next week. The governor says this effective COVID treatment isn't getting a lot of attention. NTD's Miguel Moreno has that story.
This is, again, really effective when it's done early.
Governor Ron DeSantis is opening more sites for monoclonal antibody treatment, a treatment he says many people haven't heard of. Officials expect to have at least 15 sites open by this weekend, shooting for 21 by early next week.
This is free of charge to the patient. I mean, when you see, we live in a world in which there's a lot of misinformation put out there. A lot of it is intentional on the part of people that have partisan agendas. The fact of the matter is Regeneron was purchased by the federal government lock, stock, and barrel last year. They bought the whole supply out.
This antibody treatment produced by Regeneron is meant to alleviate hospitals of some pressure. According to the company, it reduced the risk of COVID hospitalization or death by 70%. This kind of treatment is administered to COVID-positive patients with mild to moderate symptoms and those in high-risk categories through injections or an IV. The governor says you don't need a doctor referral to get this treatment. Overseas, AstraZeneca says they finished a study on a long-acting antibody cocktail, Provent. According to their statement, it successfully reduced symptomatic infection by nearly 80%. This means the company is on track to offer an alternative to vaccines. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
Current eviction bans are meant to protect tenants who can't pay their rent due to government-issued lockdowns or illness. But apparently some are just taking advantage of the situation. NTD's Arian Pazdar has personal stories from affected landlords.
Due to different eviction moratoriums, landlords around the country can't evict their tenants anymore, which can lead to huge problems for themselves. So now these landlords here in New York City got together to call for an end to all of the eviction bans.
We want justice!
The National Association of Realtors asked the federal court to stop the eviction bans, but on Friday the court declined, allowing the moratorium to go ahead. Landlords say some tenants abuse the system.
Many of them are continuing to work. Many of them have bought taken vacations, bought cars, etc. Those are the people that I'm concerned about. It's not the person who truly needs support.
He added that his tenant offered to buy the house from him, but is not paying rent. The state is offering to pay rent on behalf of some tenants, but if landlords take that money, they won't be allowed to evict the tenant for another 12 months. So most say that offer isn't really helping.
If you have problematic tenants like I do that have violence going on, violence, guns, fighting, so it's kind of like a trap. Like, yeah, I'm $20,000+ in debt, so I want to take the money, but then if I do that, I can't evict them.
The eviction ban means protected tenants can't ever be evicted.
You want your property back!
No matter the reason.
I have an incurable cancer, had absolutely progressed. My health had declined, and I needed my family to move in with me.
But her tenant refuses to leave and make space for the family.
So this woman, 13 months later, is still in my home, holding me hostage and abusing the system.
All property owners we spoke with agreed that the government should check if tenants really are suffering due to COVID before protecting them. Arian Pastar, NTD News, New York.
Another vaccine mandate's been issued in New York City. This time, Mayor Bill de Blasio announces that all public school staff and students participating in high-risk sports will need to be vaccinated against COVID. This mandate targets only high-risk sports in the public schools' athletic league. But that includes popular sports like basketball, football, wrestling, volleyball, and more. The New York Post reports that the new requirement will impact about 20,000 students, coaches, and staff members. And according to the New York City Department of Education, less than 60% of 12 to 17-year-olds have received at least one dose of the COVID vaccine. And the state of Illinois is no longer recognizing several private schools for refusing to comply with the governor's school mask mandate. Over 40 public school districts also face losing recognition. This means loss of state funding and access to scholarships. NTD's Grace Coulter has the story.
Numerous schools in Illinois are facing sanctions for not complying with the statewide school mask mandate. WGN9 in Chicago reports that as of Thursday, the State Board of Education has stripped up to 6 private schools of recognition, including Bethany Lutheran School, Trinity Christian School, and Lutheran School of St. Luke. 40 public school districts have also been put on probation for noncompliance with the mandate. The state board said the districts need to submit a corrective action plan to, quote, address the deficiencies that are presenting a danger to students and staff. Districts that do not submit a plan will lose recognition status. This means the districts would lose access to state funding, scholarship opportunities, and be unable to participate in state athletics and sports. This is now the reality facing the several private schools that have lost recognition. Governor J.B. Pritzker issued an executive order mandating masks for students and teachers on August 4th. According to WGN9, several school districts say they've consulted legal advisors about the liability and litigation they could face for defying the order, following an outcry from parents and staff. As the school year is just getting underway, parents in several school districts have already protested against the mandate. They say parents, not government, should decide whether or not their children wear masks. Grace Coulter, NTD News.
China's clampdown on tech companies continues. Beijing passed one of the world's strictest data control laws today, but one expert says it's not to protect users. NTD's Evelyn Lee has more.
China just passed a sweeping privacy law that some say is one of the strictest in the world. It reportedly closely resembles the EU's data protection law. It requires permission from users in order to handle their data or provide it to others, among other things. But Arthur Herman, senior fellow at Hudson Institute and director at the Quantum Alliance Initiative, says the law wasn't passed to clear up complaints by internet users.
And I don't think anyone living in China is fooled for a minute that this is about protecting the data of users. Everybody understands that their personal data is completely available to the government and to the police and intelligence services in China.
The Personal Information Protection Law, or PIPL, was passed Friday. The law will take effect November 1st, and Chinese tech stocks continue to plummet. According to Carmen Lucero, a fellow at the Yale Law School Paul Tsai China Center, nothing in the text suggests limits on government surveillance. Herman says quite the opposite is the case. He says the regime is sending a message that ultimately Beijing is in control and that foreign investors can't influence Chinese companies. He thinks the real reason for the new law is to limit foreign companies' access to Chinese data.
Data that they collect and their companies collect from American users, like TikTok, they see that data as perfectly available and perfectly permitted for the government, the Chinese government, to use that data as part of its building a strategic picture about America, about our allies.
Experts say that it's also part of China's ambition to become a tech superpower.
So in the end, this is really another stage in a high-tech war between the U.S. and China.
He adds that this could just be the opening shot. He expects Beijing to extend its control over Chinese companies while becoming bolder in gathering data from other countries, especially now that the Chinese regime sees the U.S. sliding away from global commitments in the light of recent events in Afghanistan. Evelyn Lee, NTD News.
A tropical storm is moving up the side of the East Coast, expected to become a hurricane and hit northeast states like Massachusetts. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more on Tropical Storm Henri.
Massachusetts is bracing for impact.
The storm could knock out power for somewhere between 100,000 and 300,000 residents.
Tropical Storm Henri isn't a hurricane yet, but it's expected to grow into one by Saturday, hit Massachusetts and whip the northeast states by Sunday. This could be the first hurricane to directly hit the Commonwealth in 30 years. The state's urging tourists vacationing in Cape Cod to cut it short and locals to stay home.
Yesterday when I got to Wareham to go sailing, they informed me that there was a hurricane coming and that I would no longer be able to stay on the mooring where I was. So we said, okay. We were coming to Plymouth and then going to Provincetown, and we called the marina here and they said they would pull us if we got here early enough. Pulling us means to put the boat on the hard, out of the water, away from the hurricane winds.
Due to the significant amount of rain and high winds, everyone in the state, if possible, should plan to be at home by Saturday night and to plan to stay at home on Sunday.
The National Weather Service, or NWS, has also issued hurricane watch advisories for coasts in New York and Connecticut. According to the Weather Service, it's been nearly 10 years since these coastal areas were put on hurricane watch. Last time it was for Hurricane Irene in 2011, a Category 3 cyclone that reportedly killed 40 people in the U.S. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
The U.S. government extends a ban on non-essential travel along the borders with Canada and Mexico. It's to slow the spread of the CCP virus despite increasing pressure to lift the restrictions. U.S. border communities that depend on shoppers from Mexico and Canada and their political representatives have urged the Biden administration to lift the ban. Canada recently began letting fully vaccinated U.S. citizens enter. But the Department of Homeland Security said in a tweet that the restrictions on non-essential travel were still needed to minimize the spread of the CCP virus and its Delta variant. It extended the ban until at least September 21st. The travel restrictions have been in place since early in the pandemic and repeatedly extended. But commercial traffic and essential crossings continue. And coming up, in light of California's upcoming recall election, several voters say that their ballot answers can be seen through the mail-in envelope. And a California digital rights group started an online petition against Apple's image scan technology. They say it violates user privacy and breaks the promise of end-to-end encryption. California has sent out mail-in ballots for the coming gubernatorial recall election. Some Californians express concern that their ballot information is visible, particularly if they want to recall the governor. A county registrar official responds. NTD's David Lamb reports.
California's gubernatorial recall election is less than 1 month away, and similar to the presidential election, voters can cast their ballots in person or by mail. But some voters in Los Angeles County, which is estimated to be the most populous county in the United States, are concerned about the mail ballot design, specifically holes punched on the return envelope. The Los Angeles County Registrar responded on Twitter saying that the punched holes have been part of the envelope design for years. It serves to validate that no ballots are left unprocessed. The registrar also mentioned the design does not interfere with postal or sorting equipment. This came after this video was posted on Twitter on Thursday. A woman shows her mail-in ballot from LA County.
This is the sketchy part. This is the crazy part. So when you fold up your ballot, more than likely, it seems natural, you're just gonna slip this in, but you have to pay attention to these two holes that are in the front of the envelope.
The video was posted by Richard Grinnell, former official with the National Intelligence. It received over 400,000 views.
You can see if someone from the outside of the mail-in ballot, you can see if somebody has voted yes to recall Newsom.
The woman says that the design is irresponsible and may lead to fraud. She recommends voters to line up their ballots in a way so that the info wouldn't be visible. Other users also mentioned the same concerns in LA County. NTD reviewed a ballot sent to voters in Northern California's Santa Clara County. The responses were not visible through the holes on the envelope. We reached out to the governor's office for comments, but they weren't able to get back to us. The last day to register to vote for the recall is August 30th, and the election day is scheduled for September 14th. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
A digital rights group in California has started an online petition to stop Apple's image scan technology. They say it violates user security and privacy. Here's NTD's Eileen Ang with more details.
Electronic Freedom Foundation announced a petition on August 17th called Tell Apple Don't Scan Our Phones. The petition calls for Apple to reconsider its upcoming software that can scan users' phones. The petition reads, the child safety changes Apple plans to install on iOS 15 and macOS Monterey undermine user privacy and break the promise of end-to-end encryption. They added that installing the software would spur governments around the world to ask for more surveillance and censorship abilities than they already have. In response to prior backlash about its move, Apple already said its system is misunderstood and explained how it works, but that still didn't reassure other professionals. On August 6, security experts, researchers, professors, and legal experts signed an open letter criticizing Apple's scanning technology. They claim Apple's proposal introduces a backdoor that threatens to undermine fundamental privacy protections for all users of Apple products. The petition currently has over 8,500 signatures. Eileen Ang, NTD News, California.
Coming up, more bad news for T-Mobile customers. The company confirming today over 5 million more customers had their data stolen, bringing the total number of people affected to more than 53 million. And Elon Musk unveils plans for a humanoid robot that can screw bolts and get groceries. But he didn't give a release date. More when we return here on NTD News.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, inventor of MyPillow. Thanks to your support, you've helped make MyPillow become one of the fastest growing companies in America. Over the last 12 years, you've helped MyPillow create thousands of jobs right here in the USA.
When I got MyPillow, I'm asleep almost immediately. I stay asleep at night and I wake up more well-rested in the morning.
That's why I invented MyPillow. My patented fill adjusts to your exact individual needs and helps keep your neck supported and aligned. I'm interrupting this commercial right now. Retailers have canceled MyPillow, and to thank you for your support, I'm gonna pass the savings directly on to you. For example, you get my 6-piece towel sets, regular $109.99, now only $44.98, or MyPillow dog beds for as low as $19.99 with your promo code.
For the best night's sleep in the whole wide world, visit MyPillow.com.
Kids will be kids, which just goes to say kids will be curious. They get into everything, everything. If there's a loaded firearm in the house, they could get their hands on that too. Keeping firearms locked, unloaded, and stored separately from ammunition in a place inaccessible to kids can help keep your loved ones safe from family fire. Safe gun storage saves lives.
T-Mobile confirming today over 5 million more customers had their data stolen recently, bringing the total number of people affected to more than 53 million. T-Mobile says data stolen includes addresses, dates of birth, and phone numbers of customers. But no credit card or other financial information appears to have been stolen. The Federal Communications Commission has opened an investigation into the breach. Some customers are suing the company for damages, saying the cyber attack violated their privacy and exposed them to a higher risk of fraud and identity theft. T-Mobile has had 6 breaches in recent years by some counts. And Elon Musk says he wants to create a robot in human form, calling it the Tesla bot. There's no working prototype yet, but he did get an actor dressed in a suit to dance on stage. NTD's Colin Fredrickson tells us more.
Coming in at 5'8", 125 pounds, with the ability to eliminate repetitive tasks for humans, run 5 miles per hour, carry 45 pounds. Meet the Tesla bot.
If you think about what we're doing right now with the cars, Tesla is arguably the world's biggest robotics company because our cars are like semi-sentient robots on wheels. It kind of makes sense to put that onto a humanoid form.
Elon Musk announced the Tesla bot on AI Day, a day of talks hosted by his company. There is no prototype yet, but Musk did get a guy in a suit to dance wildly on stage. Musk says the robot is designed to eliminate dangerous, repetitive, and boring tasks, and has a screen where the head is for useful information. It's based on the same self-driving technology Tesla uses for its cars.
This, I think, will be quite profound because if you say, like, what is the economy? It is, at the foundation, it is labor. So what happens when there is, no shortage of labor? This is why I think long-term that there will need to be a universal basic income.
Musk often announces Tesla is working on a flashy project that'll be released years later, but they often don't happen. Examples include the 1 million robo-taxis that were supposed to be on the road in 2020, currently nowhere to be seen, or the Cybertruck, which is supposed to be on the road by 2021.
Battery swap, that never happened. The Tesla Semi that was introduced in 2017, and he took, deposits on, that hasn't happened. The Tesla Roadster, that has not happened.
When an audience member asked,
repetitive, dangerous, and boring tasks tend to not be so highly compensated. And so I just don't see how to reproduce the, start with a supercar and then break into like the lower end of the market. How do you do that for a robot humanoid?
Musk responded,
well, I guess you'll just have to see.
Musk wants the robot to attach bolts to cars using wrenches, as well as get groceries. No word on if he wants it doing backflips like the ones at Boston Dynamics. Colin Fredrickson, NTD News.
Electric vehicle recalls are costing automakers billions of dollars. GM has been hit hard with a double recall of its Chevy Bolt model. NTD's Patrick Hayden reports.
Recalls of electric vehicles are costing the auto industry billions of dollars. Battery fires, loss of power and cars not starting are among the problems faced. CNBC reports that the combined recall costs for GM, Hyundai and Ford are $2.2 billion.
The industry has to worry about some of the recalls that have occurred with electric vehicles, particularly the fire issue. That's something that certainly scares consumers.
GM failed to meet Wall Street's earnings expectations earlier this month, in large part due to an $800 million recall of its Chevrolet Bolt EV. That was following several reported fires. The recall means that Chevy Bolt owners should not charge their cars indoors or overnight. That's to reduce the risk of fire until the recall has been completed. Eisenstein says there is a known risk with the types of batteries the industry uses.
It's one of the reasons why they are coming up with an entirely new chemistry for the next generation of GM products, what they call Ultium batteries. They have sharply reduced the use of cobalt, for example, which should reduce the risk of battery fires.
Reputational damage to manufacturers is causing some potential buyers to hold off stepping into the EV market. EV battery technology is still on a steep learning curve.
And I think that if GM can't solve the issue with the Bolt EV soon, it may really hurt future demand for that model. The question is whether it will also impact sales of the next generation of battery vehicles that GM is going to start bringing to market later this year, the GMC Hummer.
The Biden administration's goal is for EVs to make up half of new car sales by 2030. Patrick Hayden, NTD News.
The first Asian giant hornet nest of the year has been found in Washington state, and plans are being made to eradicate it, likely next week. Gloria Tso reports.
Donning protective gear from head to toe, officials in Washington state are on a mission.
Bulky, but I guess that's good.
To catch and kill the very first nest of murder hornets of the year. Asian giant hornets, the world's largest, can grow up to 2 inches in length. They prey on native bee and wasp populations, consuming honeybee hives and posing a real threat to agriculture.
Anytime you get any organism that is not native to an area move in, the consequences are really immeasurable.
Sven Spickiger works with a team of experts on how to trap, track, and eradicate the invasive species. First, thousands of traps baited with orange juice or jam are hung in trees along likely hornet flight paths. Once spotted, the hornet is then tracked to its nest, so its queen and other hornets can be destroyed. Researcher Chris Looney explains.
Our entire hornet program hinges on sort of 3 main bits. Finding them on the landscape first, so that's using our traps and reports from people to locate them, tagging them with a radio transmitter so that we can follow them back to their nests, which are hidden away in dense brush and the deep forest, and then the third one is eradicating that nest.
Once thermal imaging detects a nest, the entire tree is covered in plastic wrap to prevent hornets from escaping. Researchers then bat a piece of wood against the tree trunk to empty the hornets out and vacuum them up.
So that's the biggest problem is nests going undetected.
It's getting louder. Looney says his biggest fear is that there are plenty of nests yet to be found. But as the hornets emerge from the nests for their reproductive season, his team will continue trying to track them down and keep them at bay.
Firefighters in California are hoping they'll be able to start containing the Caldor fire with the help of calmer weather and the arrival of more crews. So far, the blaze has burned over 100 square miles and largely destroyed the mountain town of Grizzly Flats. Here are the details.
Workers uproot trees next to the Omo Ranch Road in California to build a fire line and stop the Caldor fire from spreading south. Almost the entire town of Omo Ranch has evacuated due to the fire. But Thurman Conroy and his wife Michelle stayed behind to protect their house and business, the Conroy General Store.
The fire wants us bad because it's made every attempt it can to get out of that canyon and up this way. So they keep beating it down, and it's just it's resilient. It's stubborn. It won't go away. And it's this is just all we can do. I mean this is part of being summer, fire season.
Their home and business were safe, but others weren't so lucky. There's no official count on how many homes were destroyed when the Caldor fire roared through Grizzly Flats this week. But those who viewed the aftermath saw few homes still standing in the community of 1,200. California firefighters spokesman Keith Wade says they're hoping calmer weather and the arrival of more crews will help them begin containing the fire.
So we were thankful for favorable weather last night during this red flag condition. With the additional resources and personnel on scene, we can really start to build that box around this fire and start the containment. We're hoping over the next several days you're going to start seeing that containment percentage increase as firefighters are doing a great job out there and we start to get this fire under control.
More than 24 new fires erupted on Wednesday alone. All but 2 were quickly contained by firefighters. On Thursday, an estimated 11,000 firefighters were on the front lines of more than a dozen large fires that caused thousands of people to flee and destroyed hundreds of properties. Many local residents have come to accept the fires as a natural part of California's summers, but that doesn't ease the worry.
Well, that's the big thing up here in the mountains, is fire. That's what we're always concerned about. And that is the natural disaster that could happen up here,
California temperatures are set to be in the mid to late 70s this weekend. Hopefully, the cooler temperatures give firefighters the edge to get the blazes under control. Grace Coulter, NTD News.
And Japan will reportedly deploy hundreds of missile units to its islands close to Taiwan as the country grows increasingly concerned about a Chinese invasion of Taiwan. Japan's deputy prime minister has said if Taiwan falls, Japan is next. Here's NTD's Don Ma with more.
Japan is strengthening its military defenses on its islands close to Taiwan. This is a move aimed at meeting China's increasing maritime military aggression. According to reports, the Japanese Defense Ministry plans to deploy 500 to 600 missile units to be stationed on Ishigaki Island by the end of 2022. These missile units are capable of striking both seabound and airbound targets. The units will be engaged during an initial response in a military conflict. The Ishigaki Island is only around 200 miles away from Taiwan, indicating that the Japanese Defense Ministry had China in mind for the missile deployment. Japan is growing more concerned about a possible Chinese invasion of Taiwan. The country's deputy prime minister has said that Japan would see an invasion of Taiwan as a threat to Japan's survival. He says if Taiwan falls, Japan will be next. Recently, China has been showing more military aggression in the area surrounding Taiwan. A former Japanese Navy captain tells NTD that he's worried.
The CCP has been expanding its sphere of influence by force since the founding of the party 100 years ago. It has used all strategic means to seize targets, including countries and regions.
He says China does indeed yearn to take over Japan.
The original plan of the CCP was to completely suppress Japan within 100 years after its founding. In fact, it is being implemented as planned. That's why the Taiwan Strait and the Indian Ocean are particularly important to Japan.
In Japan's annual defense report last month, the country warned that Japan needs to pay attention to the Taiwan situation with a sense of crisis. Japan is part of a group of islands called the First Island Chain. It includes Taiwan, Okinawa, and the Philippines. If China takes control over Taiwan and Japan, it would effectively have control of the entire First Island Chain region. This would give China a tremendous advantage in a military conflict with the U.S. Don Ma, NTD News.
Coming up, people in the UK are increasingly opting for staycations. NTD speaks to the head of Cornwall's tourism board about the influx of tourists to the area. And visitors on the island of Crete can learn about ancient Greek cooking techniques from the Minoan culture. After hours of preparation, they get to enjoy the feast. More in just a moment here on NTD News.
You worked hard for your money. You invest in stability for your retirement and your family's future, to build and leave them with something greater. The next unprecedented financial crisis, political misstep, or unstable government can depreciate it all away. It was called the gold standard for a reason, the financial preservation of tomorrow. Diversify your assets against inflation, market volatility, and the unknown with real money. Hedge your wealth with the purest form of money, physical gold and silver. Because any currency printed on paper can be manipulated. What's backing up your IRA? Do what you need to do right now to be prepared with the Reagan Gold Group. Visit now, rggusakit.com, or call us at 866-912-1384. Receive up to $2,500 in free silver coins and a free safe with your new Precious Metals IRA. Call now.
An influx of tourists to the UK's southwest as more people opt for staycations. The head of Cornwall's tourism board says he's looking to cut levels of summer tourism and hopes visitors might instead come in the winter. NTD's Jane Werrell brings us this report from Cornwall.
Travel restrictions abroad mean in Cornwall it's a busier summer than usual. Visits Cornwall says there's an extra 20,000 tourists. It's welcome business for locals with mixed views on the influx of visitors.
I think a lot of people are very worried about the COVID, but in my eyes, if they're worried about COVID, they shouldn't be here. The local people, again, some are worried about COVID, some weren't. Some people have been let down last minute with restaurants because they've closed because of COVID or whatever. Shortage of staff as well has been a problem. But generally speaking, everyone's fitted in somewhere.
The amount of people has put a strain on the local area with congestion on the narrow lanes and pressure on the health service.
August is normally busy anyway, but this year I would think we've had more people than ever. Generally, I think people are happy with the situation, but we are a little bit overcrowded at the moment.
Meals out on holidays were booked months in advance. Visitors here felt lucky they had a spot.
We had an evening meal the other day, and people were queuing up behind us thinking they could book for the next day, when in fact probably they should have booked 6 months ago.
We came last year and almost immediately I booked for this year because I knew that the properties were going to go just like that. I think everybody's sort of trying to be as mindful of each other as they possibly can. I think when you're out in the open, you feel a lot safer.
This year we've noticed it's been extremely busy compared to the years that we've been before. It's almost unbearable to walk round the shops here. It's just too many people, I think, in a small area.
The head of Cornwall's tourism board is looking to reduce numbers of visitors over the summer. This may include controversial new rules around property lets.
So we are arguing and lobbying, and the government are looking at a licensing scheme, and we want to pilot that in Cornwall next year. Not a licensing scheme, it's a registration scheme, which means that anybody renting out a house or accommodation must be registered, and then they would actually receive all the information they need to know they're safe and compliant. Because we do believe a lot of people are letting quite short lets for 2 or 3 weeks. And those properties will not be up to the safety standards required. There are potentially 72 rules, regulations and laws you have to abide to. So we feel that if we had a licensing scheme, firstly, we could keep people safe, but it would probably reduce the amount of people letting.
So that would affect the entire year, I guess. Were you looking to target the busier months because it's very much comes in waves?
Yeah, 46% of visitors come in July and August, and only 1% come in January. Cornwall's a wonderful place in the winter. Our new strategy is about we've got to contain August and maybe even reduce it. But that gives great opportunities, marine wildlife, wildflowers and the cliffs and everything else that's wonderful in the early spring. Lots of activities around cold water swimming you can do all year round. So our plan going forward is to actually hold the summer and reduce it, and then build winter trade.
Some may be looking at booking their next staycation. With months of trade lost during the lockdowns, businesses will be hoping for sustained levels of tourism to continue. Jane Werrell, NTD News, Cornwall.
An ancient tradition is being brought back to life on the island of Crete. Visitors are getting hands-on learning about cooking methods and dishes of the Minoan culture. NTD's Joy Duguid has the story.
Geraldine Morrison makes a Minoan feast on the Greek island of Crete. She has spent 25 years studying the food and cooking methods of this ancient civilization.
The Minoan civilization is considered a Bronze Age civilization, which is prehistoric, and we don't have written records that includes like how they were cooking, what they were cooking, like a cookbook, let's say. And so one of the things we do is we look at the archaeological material and decide what they had.
Carbon-dated ceramic shards, some containing actual food remnants, hold key clues in Morrison's study.
So we look at bones, seeds, and shells, and food, basically, like what we excavate and dig up, and the specialists identify them. So what we're going to prepare today is basically based on food that was either farmed, foraged, trapped, hunted, or fished.
Morrison shares her knowledge of the ancient culture with visitors, cooking in Minoan-style pots over open fires.
I did not put too much liquid in it.
One of the participants is Melissa Berlant, who teaches ancient civilizations in the US.
I love the fact that she takes the ancient ingredients and the ancient tools and brings them to life. And really, especially as a teacher, you want to form those connections for the students and make them see ancient people as real people.
After several hours of preparation, Morrison and her guests enjoy the Minoan meal of rabbit, pork and lentils.
I thought that the pork shank was amazing because it had fresh and dried figs inside, which is something that I've never experienced before.
The Minoan civilization lasted from 3000 BC to 1100 BC on the island of Crete. It had a profound influence on Western politics, technology, art and philosophy. Joy Duguid, NTD News.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox. We have a new channel. Subscribe to us on YouTube at NTD News. Get the highlights of our news broadcast and the most important headlines that we curate especially for you.
Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a trustworthy news source.